Welcome. Hello and welcome. I'm Lesley Pyne, blogger and author of Finding Joy Beyond Childlessness. I'm also an only child, and I've lost both parents. So in terms of legacy, I'm the end of the line here, and I'm here. We're all here to talk about legacy. And I've mentioned to Steph that I thought legacy would be a good idea for to discuss, and here, before I knew it, here I was organising a talk, and I think it'll be really interesting. And for me, in some ways, I've kind of purposely had my head in the sand and about legacy. So I suspect I'm not alone in that. And I think it'd be really interesting to see what others have got to say. We're going to talk about essentially four questions. How do we feel about being the end of the line? What do we do with all our stuff? And what does legacy mean? And also a bit of an exploration about how it affects how we live now. Don't know what's going to come up. I don't know what everyone's going to say, which makes it even more interesting. And what I do know is that there's not one answer. So I'm sure we'll all have different views. So thanks for joining us. And I'm just going to go around with the introductions. I'll start with Steph, as she's in the top corner here.
Hi, Lesley. So who am I? The founder of World Childless Week and the admin of several support groups on Facebook, really. Well, that's me in a summary, very quick one.
Okay, thank you. Berenice?
Co-presenter of the Full Stop with Michael and Sarah, designer, and I have a brother, but he doesn't have children either, so the pair of us are the end of our line.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Michael. It was muted.
Got myself off mute. I'm notorious for that. So if my mouth starts moving and there's nothing coming out, it's because I forgot to press the button. So my name's Michael Hughes. I'm with Berenice. I'm 1/3 of the Full Stop podcast, one half of a childless marriage. Legacy is something that has intrigued me greatly. The clan. Oh, sorry, and I also one of the founders of the Clan of Brothers, which is a safe space for childless men. And we have recently had a video. We recently recorded the video on this particular subject, and so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on some of the comments I got from that, because it was an extremely rich and interesting discussion. I'll shut up now because I tend to go on.
No pressure for us then to be rich and interesting then. Caroline.
Hi, I'm Caroline. I am a business owner, and until talking about taking part in this, I hadn't realised, but I think for me, setting up my business was my way of making sure I leave some kind of a legacy. So I'm really looking forward to delving a bit deeper into it, actually, in this conversation. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks. And Cristina.
Hi, I'm Cristina Archetti. I'm based in Oslo, Norway, although I'm originally from Italy. I'm a World Childless Week ambassador, and I'm author of Childlessness in the Age of Communication, Deconstructing Silence. I'm the first of 4 siblings, and none of us have children. So as far as I know, we are the end of the line. And this is a very painful topic for me. So I might say something, or I might actually be quiet. And in that case, you know what.
That's fair enough. I mean, it's as I say, I've buried my head a bit, and this is probably a painful topic for all of us. So kudos to everyone, and thanks everyone for talking out about it. So the end of the line. Interesting question, isn't it? How do we feel about that? I mean, for me, when my dad was alive, I felt really guilty about and really sad about not being able to make him a grandfather, because he absolutely loved babies, and I've got some second cousins, and he really adored them, and that made me very sad. I mean, he's been dead now for 6 years, and kind of doesn't matter so much now, actually, although I am the end of my parents' name, my mum's name, several of those, but it doesn't. I'm not. That's not the issue. And so much of an issue for me. I don't know about everyone else. I'm going to go round a bit in the same way that I did before. So, Steph, any thoughts about that?
For me, it's also a case that I'm the last person or the last female with the name of Brooks, my previous before getting married name. And I always thought I will never change my name when I get married because I want to ensure the name continues. But then when you find out you can't have children, when we were getting married, it was like, might as well take his name then. So Phillips doesn't actually mean anything. It's got no bearing on who I am in a way. It's just a name because I'm no longer Brooks. So as you say, there's lots of different ways of thinking of it, but I actually do more focus on legacy being what we do here and now, rather than what comes afterwards us. Yeah.
Okay. Berenice?
My family is huge. Actually, I have a very big family. So much like you, Lesley, it's kind of, I always feel that guilt. My parents are still alive. So I do feel a sense of grief over my father not being a grandfather, because he would be a brilliant grandfather. He's just fantastic with children, and that's difficult. But I'm not the end of my line in terms of my maiden name. Smith is my married name. Howard Smith is my married name, actually. But my maiden name continues with cousins who have all got lots of children. So actually at my grandmother's funeral a couple of years ago, we took up a good sort of 5-6 first rows of the pews. And I'm very conscious that I'm sat there with my husband, and my brother is with me, and none of us have children. Him and his wife haven't got children either. So for me, it's kind of complicated, because in some ways I'm gratified that some of my family have had children, that they are going to carry on the maiden name, my maiden name. But actually with that comes an awful lot of conflict, because of course, like any kind of event, it's, you know, we're renowned for being a big family, and mine is not. Mine is actually very small, and certainly during the pandemic, I've noticed that it's very isolating, because I can't share the same conversations. No one's checked up on me to see if I'm all right. They're just assuming I'm okay because I don't suddenly think. But you know, all of my family who have kids have all been checked up on. So it can be quite isolating, and I'm concerned about how that legacy continues, I think. So it's a feels of uneven and tricky balance that I think will always have to come to terms with.
Okay, sure. Michael?
I've told this story many times before, but my dad's name's Michael, and so is his dad, and so is his dad, and so is his dad. And I think we go back we can get back 6 generations so far. So I've always known that I'm part of this line, and ever since Vicky and I ever talked about having a family, it was a given that there would be another Michael. And it wasn't until 2018 when we went to Ireland so I should say that, ironically, I love the family tree. And I really have put a lot of research into both mine and Vicky's family tree. And so I got to go to Ireland and meet some of my dad's cousins, direct cousins. And one of them was very excited about the family tree as well. So he took me around to a number of places where we believe that what we can get from records is the first Michael Hughes. And he actually took me to the first Michael Hughes's grave. And that was the day that it really smacked me in the face to think that here I am standing at the grave of the man that I was named after, you know, through so many generations. And so that took a lot of getting my head around, I think. But look, I'll leave it there, because otherwise I'll just rattle on for ages. So we can continue this a bit later.
But that's I can get that, actually. We did a Woman's Hour conversation, myself and Roger, actually, some years ago, and he said to Jenny Murray, that he was like the end of, if you go back all the way to the end, he was the end of the line, and she hadn't thought about that actually. That stopped her talking, which takes some doing, and it is that, isn't it? It's that sort of. I think one of those things, maybe if you think about it too much, I think maybe that's something else I haven't thought about too much, because it is, as you say, it is hard. Yeah. Caroline?
I think I'm like you, Lesley, in the sense that to a degree, I don't let myself think about it too much. But I know my mum, we're a really small family. My mum and my dad were only children, so we've always been quite a small. I've got an older sister who's got a son who's 17, almost 17. But we've always been a really small family. But my mum's done a lot of research into sort of family trees and looking back, and it's so lovely to see the connection, make the connection. Some of my family members were bakers, which feels so special to me to think the route I've taken, and it's so hard to think. I'm quite a visual person, and to kind of see a very definite stop, it's hard, isn't it? And I think, like Berenice, I think Stephanie or Berenice said, the thought, my mum would love, she's been a grandmother, but my sister's got quite a difficult relationship with her partner, and consequently, it's been difficult with their child, and it's caused a lot of heartache, I think, for mum. Sorry, I didn't realise I was going to get so
no apologies.
And I think not being able to bring that joy into my mum's life feels like an extra weight to carry, doesn't it? It's hard.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, I don't know. No need to apologise. I think this is hard for all of us, and I don't know, Cristina, if you want to speak or not. It's entirely up to you.
I'll try. Yeah, I feel silly about agreeing to take part in on a topic I might not even manage to speak about. But this, being the end of the line is the greatest source of pain for me. And I think even, of course, we all wanted to have a child, but this is the greatest source of guilt. Absolutely the greatest. And so I think being childless, I think many of us feel we have been robbed of a future. But then I also feel I've been robbed of the past, because in a way I feel, what was the point of everything that my ancestors did if it all stops here? And I think this also leads to a really catastrophic loss of meaning when it comes to the present as well, because you don't feel like you're part of a story. So you're really stuck into this present. So for me, it is something I'm struggling with every day. You're really trying to find the meaning when there is this overarching story that is missing.
Yes, yes, I don't know what to say really, except that I think we can all relate to what you're saying, and I'm sure all those watching will relate to it too. I mean, we haven't got the answers here, have we? That's the thing, and thank you, Cristina, for saying that. What I'm tempted to do, I mean, we're going to talk about stuff, but I think maybe we'll move on and talk about what does legacy mean, because let's see if we can lift a bit, because I found some interesting definitions of legacy, and there's including things like something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor or from the past, carried over from an earlier time. And in accounting, legacy means something that's become obsolete or lost, because if you've got it like a legacy system or something like that, an IT system. And I think what works for me, and I'm sure will work for yourselves and our listeners, is legacy focuses on what will endure. And it's also about leaving behind a footprint and having a positive impact. So I just maybe shall we talk about that a little bit? I mean, what do you think about those definitions? I'll go around the same way, I think, Steph. Sorry, you're in the hot seat there.
No,
you shouldn't have got me to volunteer for this.
No, I think it's interesting because you did few different things there, and like you've got the legacy of the physical, and we don't pass that on. But in reverse, I think, well, how many generations of those before me do I actually really remember?
Yeah,
and it's not very many. You know, I really don't. I know my great grandparents, but I don't really remember them that well. I was a child. My grandparents I do. And I think we feel that almost like legacies will, because we'll be known through the bloodline. It's like we don't actually get remembered for very long anyway. The people who tend to get remembered are the artists or the doctors who create, the people who actually create something of beauty or of helpful. So it sort of lessens that idea that I'm not leaving something behind, because to me, history or the future, which therefore is what comes after us, it could be tomorrow. It doesn't have to be when I die. If I compliment someone today and then tomorrow they smile because of the compliment they received today, I've already created a legacy. And it might only last for 24 hours or even less. But it's a legacy that I'll never know of, possibly, but it's there. And I think we're so focused, and I think it's really focused when you're childless, that you haven't got children, that everything about legacy, we just automatically assume it's the fact that we haven't got a bloodline, when in reality it's so much more. But it doesn't have to be big, it can be small.
I mean, because all of us here, I mean, you particularly, you've got this huge World Childless Week, and that's a huge legacy. And some people watching might look at us and think, well, they're all, they've all got something bigger, if you like, books and podcasts and businesses and things. But as you say, I think that's a really important point to make, isn't it? It could be that smile. It could be. I mean, and I was talking to a friend yesterday in my book club, and she's in her mid-40s and she's childless, and she said she kind of looked up at me as a, I don't know, a mentor or something like that, as to how I live is shows that she can live like that. She can find, whatever happiness and joy afterwards. So it's like that, how you live and smiling at, as you say, absolutely smiling at people, a kind word, things like that. So I think that's great. And thank you. Did you have anything else? Sorry,
but no, I do really sort of try the fact that you were saying about visiting the Michael Hughes and a grave. And I always decided years ago I didn't want to be buried in the ground, because I didn't want people to come and visit me and feel sad. And it's almost an emphasis on that. And I didn't want people to feel guilty about having to visit a grave. And if they didn't visit the grave, they'd feel guilty. So I said, no, burn me, cook me, chuck me away. It's not important. I've made my mark in the world, or I haven't made my mark in the world, as big or as little as it is. I don't need to be remembered in a different way. And I knew that before I knew I was childless. So it's interesting how we all do visualize things completely differently. And I think that's important, because we can't just say it's one way of dealing with it and expect everybody who's listening to say, yeah, that's the only way of going, because there are so many ways of legacy that we feel about that hurts us.
Okay. Berenice, you knew it was going to be you next, didn't you?
I did. Oh gosh, it's a complicated question, isn't it? I think I would absolutely agree with Steph, and I think actually the idea of being bloodlines came to me actually. I was listening to what Caroline was saying about family trees. One of the things I used to do years ago, and I still actually practice it, is I do calligraphy, and that's something I was taught by my godfather, and get quite a few family trees. And there was one or two that I've done where it stopped, and I've thought, oh, I wonder what their story is. And I've asked the client who's commissioned it, and they don't know. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And my mum, again, is really into our family tree, all sorts of stuff. Publicans apparently in my family tree, appropriate really if you know me well. And but it's kind of it's interesting because I think the family history is an interesting thing. I had my great grandparents and my grandparents in my life for a long time. So I was 14 when the first passed away, and that actually was my grandfather. And I've got a lot of their stuff in this house, and we'll probably come back and talk about stuff later, I'm sure. But I'm very much aware that I sort of have one foot in the past because of the age of my house and because I like those sorts of things. Very visual, very design-driven person. And I guess that as the years have gone, I sort of distanced myself a bit from my family to protect myself, because it felt like I sort of had to do that, and now I don't quite know how to go back. I've made those changes, and now it's a bit like, oh, now what do I do? It's difficult. The whole idea of that, you know, if you smile and everyone thinks you're better, and then you have to kind of put the armor up again because everyone thinks you're better and you're over it, that sort of thing. And it's very difficult, I think, to manage that with other people. So I think for me, my legacy, I don't want to leave one in some respects. And we did talk about this briefly before the conversation online, I know, and about the idea of kind of, for me, climate change or climate emergency. I'm not going to call it change because that's ridiculous, it's an emergency. And about less stuff, less things, less everything. You know, I've made a pledge to be flight free. I will not fly unless I absolutely have no way to do it. I'll never go on a cruise because the carbon footprint, and try to live my life in as very small a way as I can. And I think for me, that feels like a very positive legacy, a very positive way to live my life with little impact as much as I can in and around other stuff. Like, you know, as Caroline said, about running a business is a footprint, but it's more perhaps about the legacies and the lessons we can learn through perhaps the work we do, the conversations we have, even if we're not public, you know, like you say, not all podcasters, and we may never be or want to speak publicly. And that's cool, that's fine. I think that's perfectly acceptable and a right for everybody. But, you know, one conversation, one thing, you know, again, on Facebook, on social media, just a like on something just could make the difference between somebody's day going a bit kind of, you know, horrible to something quite rewarding. And that in itself is a very small thing, but it's you leaving a digital footprint, leaving a legacy. But yeah, like Steph, I don't intend to have graves or anything. There's too many family graves. They're all over the place and no one gets the time to tend them. If I can go back into the soil and nourish a tree, then that's good. That's how I feel that I want to be. And it's given me some comfort to be low, you know, low living. It's not a sacrifice. It's actually a really lovely thing to do.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is live in terms with your values and what feels right to you, and what feels right to you won't feel right to everybody else. And that's the beauty of, you know, everybody's legacy is slightly different, and how we live is slightly different. But yeah,
absolutely,
Okay, thank you, Michael. Well, I hope you're going to get on a plane and come over to the UK sometime when you can.
Hell yeah. Of course.
It's it's 100 days by boat and by whatever else. It's carrier boat and train. That was it. Yeah, because I told Michael that it'll take me 100 days. So that's a lot of podcasts, miss.
Getting back to what Steph said about it can just be a gesture. Right now, I'm really annoyed that we're actually online rather than in person, because I'd like to give Caroline and Cristina a hug just to say it's okay. You know, you're not alone. Hang on. It's your fault, Caroline. You started it.
Sorry, I did.
But it's for me, it's a very complex issue, and it takes, the way that I'm thinking about it is it has to be a massive paradigm shift, and I think I'm doing it. But one of the things that this video with the Clan of Brothers talks about is that we as men particularly are are bombarded with, in very subtle ways, and in sometimes very, very overt ways, we're bombarded with this, seed must go on. I'll try and keep it as, as delicate as possible. I've used the example before, and look, I'm over 50, so I'm allowed to repeat myself. Game of Thrones is a classic example. If you look at every man that's praised or seen as, powerful and a man has a lineage of children, and every man on that show who is broken or just not right is not that way, is childless. And so I never grew up with grandparents. My dad had a very fractured relationship with his parents. His dad died before I was born. His mum, I saw her twice, so my Nanny Scotland, as we used to call her. My grandfather, my mum's dad, he died when he was 25 in Italy. So at the weeks before the end of the Second World War, so I didn't know him. And there was my Nanny London, as we used to call her. And she died when she was 55. So, I didn't really have a lot of people around me who were middle-aged and above. And so there's been nothing passed down to us, because my nan had nothing. She was a single mother with 2 children just after the Second World War. So she was just trying to make ends meet. So my parents actually have nothing to pass down to us. And I think on the positive side of that is I've never been brought up to have a connection with a thing. So I don't, which actually causes a little bit of friction in our home, because Vicky does. Vicky has an emotional attachment to nearly everything that she has, and I don't. And so where I'm going with this is that the paradigm shift has been to, like as Steph alluded to, is make today count, is make tomorrow count. It's not easy. It's because again we're bombarded with all these things that come to us as a childless community, but and that's my mindset. So that's why I do the podcast. That's why I join in with World Childless Week as an ambassador, and that's why I want to hug Cristina and Caroline, because I want to make today count. I'm going to shut up because I can just feel the emotion welling up. So.
Well, I think thank you, Michael, and I think you have made today count by what you've been saying, and you'll make today, whatever today is, for everyone who we all will, for everyone who's watching, will have helped them, and that's a great thing to have done. So yeah, thank you, Caroline.
I love this. I love that this is sort of helping us all to kind of really kind of tune into that small things thing, isn't it? It's beautiful. For me, this is sort of a joyful part of it all for me, I think, because we were going through one of our rounds of treatment when I birthed the idea of my business, and for me it's been the thing that's carried me through all of it, for that absolute reason that and I hadn't really thought of it in terms of the legacy, but I look at it as sort of finding a silver lining. So it feels to me as, when we go through the hardest times in our life, there are gifts that we're given. We just have to kind of really look hard for them sometimes, but they're there. And for me, being able to do what I do with my work, and again, it's about the small things. So I make biscuits that go through the post to people, primarily to encourage people to let them know that somebody's thinking about them, and that they're cared for and loved and encouraged, I suppose. And that to me, every time I read a gift note that somebody's writing to somebody, every single one that's that sort of somebody reaching out to do something for somebody gives me that little extra bit of, not, I think I remember, Lesley, in a chat with you when we talked about purpose, and you said you prefer not to sort of think, it doesn't have to be purpose, but it's that allowance of that sort of creativity and that meaning, I suppose. And for me, it's not swapping one thing out or the other. So it's not like, well, this is my purpose and that wasn't my purpose, but the way things have happened, here's a way for me to find meaning in my life and feel that I'm leaving that part of that legacy of me, and whether or not that is, it's not necessarily in that there will be a business left at the end of it, but there will be an impact, hopefully, that I've helped people to have on one another. And like Stephanie says, that is it's the tiny things, and it's other people having those little gestures of kindness to each other that I'm able to help facilitate, I suppose, in a way. And I know for me, in our sort of really the hardest and the darkest days, when I keep coming back to this gift that's come out of it, and the connections I've had through talking about it openly on, you know, social media and to people, and the, you know, knowing that hopefully some days and in some ways you've helped somebody see that life doesn't have to end with that decision to say no to any more treatment, and that decision to let go of something that you absolutely thought and hoped and wished would be your life, and taking a different path doesn't have to be full of sorrow. And I think, Lesley, you know, reading your book was the first time I really thought this could be, life can still be meaningful. And I think if, you know, if I can pass that message on with all its messiness, because it's not, you know, it's never going to be we're over it, we're healed, we're fine, off we go, but let people see that in amongst all of that there can still be that joy. I think that's the legacy, isn't it? And that's a life well lived, to be able to
it is
on.
Yeah, it is, exactly. I think that's, and yeah, we've got a friend whose daughter is diabetic, actually, and she's 20 now, but she's decided she doesn't want children. I mean, being diabetic, it would be hard, I guess. But she looks at myself and Roger and thinks, well, we can have a good life. You know, that's that thing, isn't it? You know, absolutely, is how you live, as well as that, you know, facilitating other people to do kind things to each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cristina.
Yes, legacy, I mean, I agree with everything that has been said so far. That legacy is not so much, at least for me, material, mainly also because I've spent over half of my life abroad. And so at many stages in my life, I had to take decisions about what shall I take and what shall I leave, because you can't take everything with you. So in this sense, maybe I'm better trained than others at actually letting go. It's not easy, though. It never is. But then, yeah, I really think that when I think about legacy, it feels like a scary word, and I feel that it puts a lot of pressure on me, because I feel like, okay, I have to compensate doing something amazing, something that is going to be remembered forever. But then, that complicates my life. And so at the end of the day, I think I don't need to do all of this. For what matters to me is really trying to make other people's life better. And some tell me, oh, you're in a great position because you teach at university and you provide education to other people. But even then, I think there are differences, because, for example, yes, I teach undergraduates and I see them for 7 weeks. They might get a good mark or a bad mark, and then who sees them again? And they disappear from your life. So I feel like I would like to have a sense of connection. And it's almost like I want to know that I've made a difference for you. I want to see the result. I want to be able to follow it afterwards. And sometimes I ask myself, why do I want this? Is it because I've got an ego? I want to know that I'm so good, that I've made all these good things. But then I think it's also human to want to know how the story continues and what's coming out of this. So I think it's been useful to reflect about this and what works for me, what makes me happier in this respect, because now I'm trying to do more activities where I can follow maybe even students for longer, like trying to supervise PhD students where you can work with them for years, or being a mentor in the university. And of course, it's interesting how you mentioned I think in a conversation we had before the recording, so that you don't think of your books as a legacy. And it's the same for me. I don't think about my academic books as legacy. Somehow I assume nobody will read them. But the book I wrote about, which is also an academic book, but it deals with childlessness. I feel more like maybe this will make more of a difference to people's lives, and that gives me more a sense of it.
Yes, it's interesting about that ongoing connection, isn't it? I think that for me, I mean, I know, my book, I wrote it because I wanted to hold it in my hand, and I know it makes a difference. But I don't sort of think about it. I guess I don't get so much feedback from it. It's that it's out there. Yes, I get money from Amazon every time it sells, and when I get positive, like I think Caroline, when we had a conversation, you said it had helped you, and that's why you do it, isn't it? Because you get that feedback, and I'm sure that's the same. That's the same for all of us. But it's that sort of not knowing is it's a bit of a challenge sometimes, I think. I've just found a couple of quotes here, which is that that there was some studies. Most people evaluate, a study on leaving a legacy found that most people evaluate a life well lived in terms of loving relationships and social impact, which I think that's what we've been talking about, isn't it? I mean, I think, we think that we've got to leave something, but actually when all these studies, they sort of, when they talk to people, it's more about what we've been talking about, is how we live now, and how we make those small differences every day. And there's a question I've found, which I'd like to ask, actually, and it's the bits before the question were about a bit religious, but I think the question is like, what did you do with what I put in your hands? And it's like when you're standing at the end of your life and reflecting back, is that what did you do with what you had, with your gifts, or your life, and I think that's an interesting question, isn't it? I don't know if you want to go, if I should go Steph first, or anyone else would like to jump in and go in different order.
I'll jump in anyway and go first. Why not? I think, like you say, it shows that sometimes material things, they're not important. The bloodline is not important. Do you know what I mean? It's like we can all say, oh, a parent might say, I've left a child behind. But is that child a sign of you living a good life to others? Having a child, does it mean that child will grow up well and could not be? I was literally this morning thinking, well, if your only thing that you focus on is the fact you've had a child, none of us have control over who that child becomes. They could become somebody who's really evil and nasty, vicious. And is that the sort of thing you want to think, oh, I'm glad I had a child, that's my legacy? But your child might not actually be somebody you feel respectful for, if you know what they're going to do after you pass away.
And also, people, often lose contact with their families, don't they?
Yeah.
That's,
But that's it. It's like, it's no guarantee, because having a child, that they will be in your life. They might not choose to be part of it. And again, there's that breaking up sort of thing. So if you haven't got a child and you feel you need legacy, it's almost, you might make more of an effort to do something that is positive in the world here and the now, which is good. And saying about you don't always know what you do, again, you brought that up. And my husband is into sort of health and fitness and researching it. And he'll always, if somebody says, I've got this ailment or whatever, he'll look for the natural things if they ask, and send them details of the things that they could use to help them. What sort of lotions and potions and tablets are out there, and the best ones. He'll really research it and to do that. Or he'll help people with exercise. He suddenly had somebody, because he used to say, well, nobody comes back to me to say anything's happened. A friend contacted him and said, do you know that information you gave me about health 20 years ago? I still follow it today. And it just shows it went on for 20 years without even knowing about it. So again, it's an impact on somebody that we don't know about.
Mm.
You know, and it is about the relationships we have, but it's about being kind, being generous, being loving.
Yes.
And it could be to a stranger. It doesn't have to be to somebody who's the bloodline.
Mm.
So I really, you know, I totally focus on the here and now when I can. I'm not saying that sometimes you don't think of the future and think there's no little me following behind, but it isn't my be all and end all regards to legacy anymore. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, you're right. That's absolutely. I think that's. I know I've had that friends sometimes say to me, you know, you said that thing. Well, did I? I don't remember. But yeah, it's that sometimes the words can make a big impact, and people do remember them, and that's yeah, kind word goes a long way, doesn't it?
And I think the other thing to sort of say is, like, in relation to World Childless Week, I founded it, but you know, I'm a small percentage of the actual submissions that go in there. And people are like, oh, I've never done anything, I've never spoke out, I'm not like you. It's like, okay, but you might have made one submission or made one comment on a submission anonymously that somebody else read and went, wow. And it's a circle, because I've got somebody now who's doing a webinar for World Childless Week this year, who actually says World Childless Week was the instigation, the start of her to learn to sort of understand where she was, that she was grieving and coming around. She's now speaking out. And she's not doing it for a blog or anything like that. And this webinar will be the first time she sort of speaks out publicly about it. But I said to her, you do realise you've done the full circle, that you're now giving the support that you first received. And I think if we do that continually for those who are childless, we're passing down our legacy for the people who need it and the people we understand the most.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Lovely. Yes. Berenice?
I'm just listening and just trying to get some thoughts together. Sorry, slightly lost.
Back to you if you like.
lost my direction. Oh gosh, where am I thinking, or where am I going with this? For me, it's kind of an odd thing, because around the time, or just after the time that we had our last IVF cycle, and I miscarried after that, I had a diagnosis of dyspraxia. And it's quite mild. It's, you know, generally okay. If you Google it, it tells you that I apparently can't get dressed in the morning and have issues with washing, and that's an incredibly awful thing to, you know, the assumptions that are made about people with dyspraxia and with any kind of form of kind of neurodiversity is quite poor, and that kind of contributed, I think, to sort of coming to the end of our journey. Because I'd always thought throughout all my life I was different. You know, we were quite a family that used to do lots of walking and things, and I'd get to the point sometimes where I'd stand and think I can't move, and I didn't know why I couldn't move. I couldn't move over. There was a certain, you know, a place or somewhere or wherever that I just kind of like think I can't do that. I physically can't do it because my brain didn't connect to my feet in any particular way, and I couldn't see a path through. Sort of metaphor for lots of things, isn't it really? But I was always good at sort of other stuff, art and things like that. And part of the thing that I did when I came out of the IVF, I got made redundant, and I had the dyspraxia, you know, a diagnosis. My mother-in-law died. The cat passed away, all within about a month of each other, just before work. So over the course of sort of September. So Septembers are always tricky months for me. And I guess I think that I sort of took comfort again from probably, my business, my design business. That's important to me. But I spent my redundancy money on doing a master's degree. I thought, I'm just going to go and do that. I want to do something that kind of makes my brain work a bit and takes perhaps some of the thought process away without having to sort of grieve too much. And it came about from that I ended up doing an art project, which became Walk in Our Shoes. And I went more public than I didn't actually intend to do any of that at all. It just was. I just remember thinking I had this idea about what it could be and telling people stories anonymously, so that actually some voices got out there, and all the people that are on there, that website keeps going. It's not updated, but it keeps, I'll keep it live because it's a footprint of telling people stories. But I'm not quite sure where I'm going with any of this, other than that I think that external forces can affect perhaps how we we are viewed and how we perhaps make our legacies. To me, things way beyond my control, not necessarily the outcome of IVF and the difficulties in conception and miscarriage, but also I think other things. So yeah, being neurodiverse is completely, in some ways I've been now allowed to forgive myself. In some ways it's helped, because I thought I don't want any child to go through what I went through growing up, which is last to be picked for anything. Anything physical. I didn't get bullied. I was quite, quite assertive in school. I never actually had that, despite my name and the differences that I had. I wasn't, and I was lucky, very, very lucky that I didn't. But I can imagine that an awful lot of people are for those things. And it's difficult weight carrying a name like mine too. It's all those different things that sort of make someone who they are. And maybe that's those differences that are something about legacy as well. I'm not sure where I'm unpacking that, but it's...
Maybe it's about showing how you can live with that you can live, it's another layer on top of childlessness, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah. And I think certainly in business networking as well, I've always been quite open. I have to go to these things. It's a huge bee in my bonnet that actually, there's a podcast called Doing It for the Kids for freelancers, and I just really piss, and it's a great podcast, but for God's sake, what am I going to call anything an equivalent? Doing It for the Childless? You can't do that. It's not the same, and I think it is creating divides. So one of the big things for me is bringing those differences back together again, trying somehow to create kind of allyship. In fact, just before I came online, someone who is a parent tweeted something about World Childless Week, and we've had feedback from parents for the podcast. So I think if people can just have a little bit more understanding and empathy, again, around neurodiversity, around childlessness, about the differences, because actually, what's normal?
Exactly.
I mean, I just want to say, what the hell is normal? It's just that more people have had kids, but that doesn't mean they're normal. Is that, given the climate breakdown, given that actually having children puts a carbon footprint, should we be redefining what that normal means? I really feel that, that is a topic that needs to be kind of thrashed out somewhere, because actually it's, probably leaving actually a better
discussion, I think.
It's another discussion, but I just think, what the hell is normal? So
exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Michael.
It's going to sound really weird, but I've got to give some context first. So my parents are now elderly, and one of the things that has become, well, it hasn't become evident now, but it is added to my thoughts, is they have no friends. And so I think to myself, because we've got to prepare for things like funerals and that sort of thing, and I just think how sad it's going to be when there's not going to be many people at their funeral. Sorry if I'm getting morbid, but I will bring it up a bit. Now, one of the things that Vicky and I really enjoyed doing before this bloody pandemic was inviting people over to our home, because being in Australia, it's warm, so summers were a great time to bring our friends together. So about 35 kilos ago, when I was still riding my bike, I had my cycling friends. There's Vicky's work friends, my work friend, colleagues, and people we've known for a long time. And we'd actually bring them all together to our home and have a get together. So these people could then connect with each other. And I've thought on that a lot. And so, like I said, it's about make today count. We've all recognized it's about, our paradigm shift is now around doing good in the world. That will be our legacy. So I have a measure for mine. I have a measure that says how many people will come to my funeral. because, and I don't mean to say that, you know, I'm 2 weeks out from me popping my clogs and I walk around to people going, yeah, here's a ticket. But how many people's lives have I touched? And it can be in the smallest way, but how many people will come to my funeral? And because I want it to be a celebration. Vicky and I have a chat, you know, a bit of a laugh about this. I want dancing girls at my funeral, because I want to celebrate the end. I want to celebrate the end of my life, but I also want to make sure that when I do, that I've touched as many people as I possibly can. And yeah, so I know that might sound weird, but that's the way that I see. Because one of the things that we talked about in the Clan of Brothers is legacy really real? Or is it just something like Cristina has said, is it just a pressure that we put on ourselves?
Yeah.
You know, and so we explored that a little bit. And one of those, getting back to the story of the funeral, one of the things that we talked about was that we want to fix the wrongs of the past as well. So one particular chap has a lot of passed on trauma from his ancestors, and he wanted to make a difference, to say, oh, that I want that trauma to stop with me. You know, and he sees that as his legacy, as his, you know, as his mark on the world. And that's the way that I actually quite like to think about it, is what is my mark on the world when I pop my clogs?
I think that's absolutely great, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, actually, because when my dad died, the big church was full, because he was, my parents had a newsagent shop and he had paper boys, and he kept some of them on the straight and narrow. He was a referee, and he also set up a lot of children, heavily involved in football, and yeah, it was full, and it's, I think that's a really interesting question. Thank you. Yeah, Caroline.
I really like that quote you said. I can't remember it exactly, but there's a really similar one that I love, and I have it pinned up actually in the bedroom, and it's maybe what matters most isn't what happened to us, it's what we choose to do with it. And I love that, and I think it can be tricky sometimes, because you can feel a pressure with that and a weight. I think somebody said, I can't remember who it was, about, you know, there shouldn't be a pressure to feel like we have to leave this big thing behind and make this big impact. But I love, on the other hand, I absolutely love the thought that I really believe that we really do have a choice. You know, we can't, things happen and we can't influence always what happens to us, but I really believe that we do have a choice in what we do with it. And I just think it's lovely to think that we can choose to sort of, I guess for me it feels like a sort of shift, from a really small shift from the notion of kind of that grief shifting to hope, I suppose, and that grief sort of shifting to something meaningful. And I think, as we've said a lot, you know, in this last hour, like looking back and seeing it as acknowledging that it is these small things and these small impacts that we may or may not know that we've had on people. That's what we all want to kind of leave behind. That's, you know, when we're asked at the end of it all, you know, what was our gift, what did we do with it, then I think perhaps being in the position that we're in, there's part of that gift is that we perhaps have a different level of compassion in some ways. We have that sort of, we've been through and we go through things that have changed us and that have changed how we treat people or how our relationships work. And I think it's, in some ways, it's a beautiful thing that we have that sort of, and perhaps we also maybe have perhaps sometimes more time, or we have more space, I suppose, to really think about what we want and what impact we want to leave and the legacy we want to leave. Because and it's not selfish. It's not being selfish, is it? But it's thinking of ourselves. And there's a gift in that, I think, as well. I really do.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Cristina.
Yes, if I think about the question, what did you do with your gifts? I think if I was asked that question, probably I would say that I will say I've used them well, and I had no choice but to do that. Because I think not having children really kind of puts you face to face with yourself. Because suddenly, the templates that were available to others, I mean, some people, they just have children, they don't think about why they have them. You just, fit into the pattern. And so this wasn't available to us. And so suddenly you have to ask yourself questions. Okay, why am I here for? What am I going to do? So I feel like I'm constantly in front of these questions. And even, so I can relate with what... is it Berenice or Berenice? Yeah, was saying, sorry, I never know how to pronounce names. Yes. Not only my family, yes, we are 4 siblings, but we are that family, but also I live abroad. And now, for 2 years I've lived on my own, and now I live again with my husband. And so it's 2 of us. And so it's not like you come home and then there are people to distract you and to tell you their stories. So you are constantly with yourself. And so, I mean, I'm taking this as an opportunity to work on myself. And what Michael said about trauma and this person, who wants to work on the traumas. I think, I'm going to work on my own traumas as well more. In fact, soon I'm going to start training to become a trauma therapist. And for me, that's also important. Somehow we connect with the past because, yes, by healing your own traumas, you heal the traumas that you've been passed on from the past, and you don't pass them on anymore. And so I'm trying to think about, yes, I can't pass them on biologically to anyone, but then I can deal better with the people around me. And that's, again, part of trying to leave a positive impact on the people around me. And I'm very inspired also by what Michael says about thinking in terms of how many people will come to our funeral. That's very touching, and I think that's something to think about.
Thank you. We're getting towards the hour, and I think we won't discuss stuff because I think we've got quite positive, and that might not just take us into something a bit more negative, because I don't think there's an answer to that. But so and I've also got an exercise, but what I think I'll do with that is I'll add it as a PDF if people want something to think about. But what I would like to ask everybody, one little question is, it can either be what we've talked about, making today count, and I think to me that's the most interesting thing, and for me that's the most useful thing to come out of what we've talked about. And what am I going to do differently? And I'm not quite sure what that is yet, actually. I think I'm a bit more mindful about my conversations with people and more aware of that being a role model for some people. And I know this last 18 months have been strange. And I've been, I think, a good friend to some people, particularly. I've checked up on a few more people, and I like to think I'll continue that. So I guess I'm going to ask you what have you learned from today? I guess that's the open question, isn't it, really? And maybe I'm going to go in a different direction this time. I'm going to start with Cristina. Just to keep you on your toes. Sorry. You probably already said it.
On the fact I would have lots of time to think about.
Sorry. Well, there you go.
I said at the beginning that I'm struggling with the present, to find meaning in the present. And I don't know, I think I find this conversation we've had today very inspiring. And in fact, it reminds me exactly of that at some point, even if I don't want to think about it, we will die. And what matters is really what we've done for other people. So I think I'm going to be less stressed about maybe work in the sense of, I should have done this, I should have done that, when connection is the most important thing. And I can use maybe my work as an opportunity for connection. So I think for me, the word of today is connection, focusing on that. And that's where also my sense of reward comes from, and the warmth and where the impact that I can make can make a difference.
Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, I think it's been great, and I think that reminder that make today count, I think, is going to be printed off and put somewhere where I see it. I'm a big lover of quotes that mean something to me, and I think that just that reminder, I think I find and I think it's a reflection of the world we live in. It's so easy to just get caught up in the busyness of life and the you know, the stress and the forward thinking all the time, and the what next, and I think, you know, this morning has just been such a lovely reminder of the impact of sort of zooming out and really thinking, well, what is, you know, I know it's perhaps a bit of a cliche, but that whole, you know, the top 5 regrets of the dying thing, and what really will we, when we are, you know, thinking about legacy and leaving something behind, what really does matter. And I think we're all in agreement that it is those small gestures of daily kindness and doing and taking that pressure off from feeling that we have to do big grand things, but actually we don't. We just have to be good people and kind, and that we will never know the impact that has, but we just have to trust and know that at the end of the day, that will give us as much peace as we can have, won't it? So it's been brilliant. Thank you.
That's lovely what you just said. I can't remember exactly, but it was lovely, and I reckon I'm going to embroider make today count, because that's what I do. But you're right. Yes, Michael.
I get a lot of imposter syndrome. Don't know if the rest of you feel that.
Yeah.
But there are some days that I'm absolutely like frozen with imposter syndrome, and today has actually, and I don't want this to sound like big-headed, but it's reinforced in me that being that role model is extremely important, even though again I feel I get imposter syndrome. So something that happened pre-pandemic, but I went down to our local shopping centre, and it just happened to be a day when there was lots of people I knew, and 3 men in particular stopped me. One I've known for a very long time, one for a short time, but he's a registered psychologist. Third one escapes me, but no, I think it was my brother-in-law actually. And the conversation got around to and they're all 3 of them are fathers, and they all said to me, "Wow, Michael, what you do is amazing." And that comes from the fact that, you know, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I am who I am. And so that, even I'm just trying to say how bad that imposter syndrome is for me sometimes, even though I have people saying good things to me. But today has really encouraged me to, you know, to just keep that going, is, you know, because it is about the small things. And I think all of us here today, you know, can feel some joy in the fact that we will make an impact on someone's life when they watch this video. And can I just say one more thing? I think listening to the name Berenice in Italian, awesome. Awesome. All right, I'll just shut up now.
Berenice.
We'll just say it in, you know, boring old English, shall we?
Yorkshire, there you go.
You should hear it in other languages, and yeah, it's very entertaining. I was going to say about imposter syndrome, and just one thing that I think is so important that we've done. I think everyone kind of needs to do it, whatever demographic you are, is to write down or record, stick them on the wall, print them out, just scribble it somewhere, the things that people have said that are positive, and just remind yourself of them on a good day. I get really bad days sometimes in my business. When I had a particularly bad day yesterday, someone quibbling over an invoice, and it was just frustrating. And then I thought, oh, hang on a minute, this doesn't happen that often. Actually, people do say more good stuff than they say bad stuff, and actually, and it wasn't bad stuff, it's a misunderstanding. And I think sometimes reminding ourselves of the good stuff, even if it's just scribbled in a notepad, just go back and read it and say, okay, yeah, that happened. I think that's important. What am I going to do differently? I don't know. I kind of, a lot of what Michael said about, friendship and things like that. I'm a huge introvert. I think the pandemic has been somewhat kind of quite nice in the sense that I had any reason not to go out, but I'm finding that I'm not going out now, and I've got to sort of be less like a hermit. That would be good to do. I'm hoping to do things like that, but I'm definitely the introvert of the podcast, I know. That would be good. Make some more connections, build some connections. But I think carrying on with what I'm doing, meditation, yoga, and I think having a dog, you tend to sort of live in the moment, because her day centers around, next now tea time. That's kind of how dogs work, and you sort of tend to get caught up with all of that too. That's really, I think for me, is being more, meditation that I do with Bindi has been really important in living in the moment, and hugely beneficial to me in fixing sort of and connecting my mind and my body back together again. So much more of that, and yoga to kind of get through some of the stuff that I have very, very huge hang-ups about my body, and the fact that it's let me down, not least dyspraxia, and then of course infertility on top of that. So I think actually keep building on that, and actually just being kinder to myself, because we could all do with being a bit kinder to ourselves. And I think that helps us then to be kind and perhaps a little bit more patient with others. As I've connected all of this back up again, they're just being healthier. And
it starts with us, doesn't it? I think that kind you have to be kind to yourself to be kind to others, and by doing what you're doing, it sort of shows, as we talked about. I mean, it's great what Michael was saying about, we're all doing, we're all here doing something to show that it's possible to live a positive life childless, and it doesn't have to be a podcast. It doesn't have to be World Childless Week as something as big as a book. It's just living, not just, it's living in a way that shows that you can find happiness.
A little bit of healing, I think, helps, because then I think if you heal, you can then have more tolerances, I think, for some of the stuff that goes on out there that can always hurt us. As Bindi calls it, your ball of light. I think, and that's a really important thing, shield yourself a little bit with a bit of healing.
Exactly. Yes. Steph.
Sort of a little bit going on from what you've just been saying, but as we were talking, I was just literally just scribbling words down on a piece of paper beside me and doing arrows. And the one thing that I sort of circled around is the fact that we get told we're given the gift of life. And the gift of life is to us as individuals. It's not to who follows after us. It's to us as an individual. And perhaps that we should remember that it is a gift, and actually try, like you say, to find the positives, to enjoy it for what it is rather than what we hoped it was, and to celebrate it. And I think if we can focus on the positives and use those positives in ways that support others, in the way we treat other people, the way we talk to other people, the way we compliment other people, we then give an emotional imprint to the world, which is the legacy. And we don't have to focus on giving a physical imprint. So I think it's about, really is like, enjoying the gift of life that we've got and using the happiness that we find within that to support others. And that can be a legacy, therefore, that continues in a completely different way and has 100% positive impact, and can be leaving the world in a better place. So
See, I knew I did the right thing by leaving you to last, because that was a really lovely summer. That was beautiful, actually, really lovely. So and I think there's quite a few things for me that I want to listen to again and write that down, because that was great, Steph. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I mean, it's been an interesting hour and 10 minutes, I think, and tears, laughter, and I think, as I said at the beginning, I knew there wasn't one answer, and there hasn't been. And I hope, yeah, thank you all. And I hope that for those watching, find some inspiration. Thank you.
I'm sure they will, Lesley. You know, it's been brilliant
you.
what you've asked us.
That's really good. Thank you.
Thank you.